Hi there, starting a new series, and this is devoted to books about knife fighting and the associated training for that. Now, up to now, the books that I reviewed, which are all from my personal library, I've generally been very positive about, because these are the books that I've enjoyed, I've read sometimes more times than once, and the kind of books that when you're amongst a group of friends you recommend to them, and you tell them why. When it comes to this section of books, which I've amassed a few, the territory is rather uneven. Some of the books are good and some have some quite dubious content, and I feel obliged to point this out because, in all honesty, if you're watching this for information purposes, it's just as well to know what to avoid as well as what to embrace. So a couple of points of consideration is what is a knife fight? Different authors have different interpretations of this. What type of knife are we talking about? What type of knife are you going to have on you or be issued with in a military context, for example? What's the legalities? What's your lifestyle? So, what is the background, training, and experience of the author to talk about the subject? Now, some authors base this on martial arts background, and in some cases that's excellent, but some of the martial arts really are not knife orientated. For example, my main martial arts background for a long time was in Okinawan Goju, and it's really the opposite of a knife fighting system. Edge weapons were banned in Okinawa, so they developed more of a staccato power based way of fighting. And when I was first introduced to the Filipino martial arts, well, first of all I saw them in a book, and my vision of them was completely different to the reality. My introduction to them was with Danny Inosanto, who's a world level master, and it was completely different to what I expected, and completely different to my own background. Very fluid, flowing, very fast use of the weapon. So depending on if an author is depending on a martial arts for expertise, it's got to be a relevant martial art. Okay, the book that I'm going to start off with is probably the first book I bought on the subject, and it's this one, Secrets of Modern Knife Fighting by David E. Steele. And apart from Cold Steel by Stiers and Kill or Get Killed, which has sections on knife, this was one of the earliest kind of comprehensive or would-be comprehensive books on the subject. The author, David Steele, worked in some types of law enforcement for a while. He was a probation officer, for example, and was evidently trained in some types of martial arts as well. The book starts off discussing the history and the development of knife fighting. There's a couple of anecdotes in there, and it's pretty good overview, and I can't fault that at all. He then dissects some of the existing material, for example Stiers, and it's a pretty good discussion about that. So I don't have any issue with that. Then he goes into his technique, core technique of the book, which is just really a series of rather large photographs, different knife grips, which you may or may not think relevant, and some techniques. And it's very, very clear that his main concept of a knife fight is a duel. And if you take it from history, particularly from the other edge weapons like the sword, a lot of the material did come from dueling. However, the idea that two people will face off, each with a knife in their hand, which can happen, but you've got to ask yourself, what are the circumstances leading up to that? That two people have ended up in the situation. What was the precipitation? At what stage was the knife introduced, and how come it was introduced simultaneously? So it's rather, to me, an artificial scenario. It's certainly one that can exist, and in some cultures probably exists more than others, but in the modern Western world, it's not really the case. And a lot of knife fighting would be an unequal fight, where one guy has the knife first and the other guy's got to use some sort of unarmed measures until he can get his knife or other weapon into play. Some of the, I'll say, he talks a lot about grips, and some of the photographs are full page, so it's kind of a bit of a waste on all the different types of grips. These grips do exist. Do you need to know many of them? Are all the subtleties? Probably not. The core of the techniques in the book really is a series of postures and isolated techniques, and it's not really a system with a training progression that you can learn. If you take as a model pistol shooting, where most of the major schools, if you're starting from zero where you don't know anything, they take you through a progression, various practice drills and so on, up to a level of skill. The system in this book doesn't present that at all. It's just almost random techniques put together from various sources. In a couple of cases, the captions are mixed to the wrong photographs, so you have to work that one out. The rest of the book then is comprised of photographs of knives, really nice pictures and nice knives and knives that you might want to buy, but it's not really, that section isn't a book on fighting. It's just like a collector's book, like we reviewed in a previous playlist, books for knife collectors, or excuse me, about the genealogy of different knives and so on. Bob Casper personally told me that it was this book and similar material that has actually held back the development of systemized knife fighting training for a long time. So I think that's an apt summary. There is decent material in the book, and I wouldn't say it's a waste of money by any means, but for actual knife fighting technique, it's rather limited. So that's a caveat to bear in mind.